All right, the recording has started, and this is the May 28th, 2019 Crossplane community meeting. And we have a new member of the Crossplane community on the call today. Marcus is joining us today and is a recent Upbound hire. So welcome to the community in the meeting here, Marcus. We're glad to have you.
Thanks. Glad to be joining.
And I could tell the profile pictures of yours, Marcus, that are older than some of the newer ones. Like some pictures don't have a beard on
Right.
you, and then
Yeah.
I can't tell how long ago those are, but the beard one is it suits you well, I think.
Yeah. It's weird how something like that you just become associated with it, and then there's all the beard conversations that you can have with people.
I was listening to something recently that there's apparently a SIG beard, a special interest group for beard in the Kubernetes community, which I was kind of surprised to joke, but it was kind of surprised about because it's not very inclusive. But there does exist a SIG beard. All right, so let's. I will be the first to admit here that coming off of KubeCon Barcelona, which I think was very successful, and we have an item here in the agenda to talk about. Coming off of that, I didn't even open my laptop until this morning, unpack it from my luggage and stuff. So I am running a little bit behind and trying to page things back in. I think that some of us might be in that same boat as well, that we're going to need to ramp back up again after Barcelona. Um, so in terms of, we're in the 0.3 milestone, and we had a agenda item from the previous meeting to kind of formulate a plan and kind of lock down some of the themes and issues that we want to tackle on for the rest of the milestone, and kind of a plan for the milestones coming up. We need to still approach that. So I'll take ownership of that now that we're back from Barcelona and drive that. But I did want to, in this meeting here, kind of solicit some feedback or brainstorm ideas for what are some of the major themes going forward. I had started a little list here. Let me make this a little bit bigger too. I had started a little list here of just some top of mind things that themes here. And so those are, the work that we had done to support GitLab. Folks worked really hard on that and put in a lot of effort to get something functional. It's definitely, we took some shortcuts, and there are some refactoring, rewrites, lessons learned, et cetera, from that we want to incorporate back in and improve that support. So that'll be definitely one area where we want to spend some more cycles on. Another area is increasing our surface area. So the various resources and cloud providers and environments, et cetera, that we support, it would be good to get a better understanding of which ones, do we have gaps? Where is there community demand? And where should we put some further investment into increasing the scope of our surface area of what we support? And then another huge one that we've been talking about for a while, and that I know that there is good support for amongst some of the core developers of the project, is to increase the production readiness, production quality, to drive some of our existing resources and controller support to being able to actually be adopted by a community, by the wider community, and start getting more usage and traction. The last one I had written down was we had recent feature support for extensions to be able to extend the Crossplane with new functionality that's built out of tree. And we did an initial implementation of that for as part of the GitLab support. And so it's fairly bare bones. It doesn't support dependency resolution or upgrades of the out of tree extension controller stuff. So I think that would be some more work that we want to continue to add support in as well. Is there other ideas on this call for general themes that we want to be tackling in the rest of the 0.3 milestone and upcoming milestones?
Yeah, I think we talked about essentially supporting folks that are running existing workloads, like just deployments and stateful sets and replica sets, without using complex workloads or any of the workloads APIs in Crossplane. and making that a priority. So single cluster focus, existing workloads, being able to use, the managed services that are exposed by Crossplane. So essentially layering Crossplane so that layer one is support for managed services without changing their workload model, without being really supporting it in every way. And then layer two is the full complex workloads, multi-cluster and scheduling across multiple clusters and multiple clouds.
Yep, that makes sense. Do we already have an issue captured on that specifically, Bassam, or is that?
We have a few. We have like local Crossplane support issue and a bunch of others that are like, but not one that's we need to kind of, I think, turn this into a theme. So.
Yeah, I think it is more of like an epic theme type of level than it is a single issue. All right, any other high level items to add to this list? All right, I will take a first stab. It's kind of probably like the way I'll do this is updating the roadmap, and we could have more discussion, on as a community there with adding these items, incorporating them into the roadmap. If there are other items that people find are of importance or want to get it incorporated in as well, please let me know, and we can definitely include them. So let's see. Are there any comments that anybody wants to make on the support that we have for GitLab? Like anything specific that we want to revisit, or something that may influence other themes that are more broad than just GitLab? All right. All right, so let's move down to the community topics section. So KubeCon Barcelona was awesome. That was really fun. We had a number of talks. Ilya gave a great talk about how to write reliable and production ready operators and controllers, which was really popular and had a lot of people, generated a lot of discussion, a lot of interest. I gave a couple of talks that were focused on Brook, but also incorporating Crossplane in as well. And there was a whole bunch of people that we got to meet and talk with, and there was a lot of excitement. That was definitely a very fun experience for sure. Was anything that anybody wants to share about their experience in Barcelona, or any key takeaways or observations that they made?
Yeah, I'd say we had a lot of discussions that were on Crossplane with a number of people in the community around the two layers that I just mentioned. Folks that are wanting to use Crossplane to help them manage services from the Kubernetes API, for things like databases and message queues and all the other services. So there was definitely a lot of interest in that. And then similarly, there was a lot of interest in people wanting to do clusters, multi-cluster scenarios. And so I think we got really good validation. Phil, who's compiled all this feedback, maybe when he gets back next week, in the next community meeting, we can kind of summarize all the feedback, because we got a ton of feedback that could be incorporated into kind of the future plans around what we do with this project. The other thing that's probably worth interesting is that Crossplane got mentioned at a keynote, which I think was cool, as an example of how to extend the Kubernetes control plane and do more interesting things with it. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, that was definitely very cool to check out so shockingly, all the videos, recorded sessions and talks are already published. So all the keynotes, all the breakout sessions, all those are already on the web. I think the entire conference is already up. So they did a really good job of getting all that stuff published very quickly. So you too can follow along at home and watch the keynote mention on, I think it was from Thursday, by Brian Lyles in his talk about mentioning Crossplane. So that was really neat.
Yeah, the only other thing else worth mentioning probably is around GitLab, and I think we did like two demos with GitLab. One was the how do I take the existing, single cluster Helm chart based GitLab and without much modification, have it use Crossplane to use things like Postgres and Redis and buckets and everything else. So I think getting that to be more production ready and fixing all the issues we just talked about is important. But then the other scenario is kind of on layer 2, as I've been describing it, is getting, getting GitLab to be a good multi-cluster application on Crossplane. And that there's more work to do here, but it's also a super concrete use case for us. So we can continue driving that. I know we have an early attempt at it with the GitLab controller, but the GitLab team itself is interested in kind of pursuing the next steps there. So it's super concrete to see something like GitLab run, on top of Crossplane. It makes it all the more real.
Yeah, definitely. That was really, really cool seeing that come together in the early support that we were able to pull together. That was great seeing that, both the effort and then also the fruits of that labor as well. And it's really good to continue to have the GitLab team interested and engaged in this as well. So that's really great to have that. All right. So that is Barcelona, and we can move on to, I wanted to see if we could drive a quick resolution to this topic here. We for expediency, while we were rapidly trying to finish off some items for demos and such in Barcelona, we had investigated temporarily disabling some checks on pull requests. And so we started some discussion about re-enabling those again. And so it looks like there is a skip check functionality that maybe we could use in the future, but that definitely brings some questions as well. So Nick and Ilya, I know you all had been discussing this, and I'm happy to weigh in as well, but did you want to summarize where we are with that, like the current status of the checks on PRs? Are they re-enabled again, or do we need to do some refactoring here? Or what's the current status of that?
I can give it a quick shot. So obviously, in perhaps the last community meeting or the one before that, we spent some time debating our code coverage semantics, and just to preface this conversation, we decided afterwards that we didn't want to spend too much time debating sort of code hygiene on the community meeting, and that it might break out to a different meeting. So if this isn't quick, then maybe we should think about doing that. I have written a couple of manifestos about why I think that optional checks on GitLab have a very bad user experience. Don't know if any of them are easily linked to from here. Maybe this issue might have mentioned that. So what we decided to do last time was make all of our checks mandatory, including one that requires you to have 80% code coverage of your diffs when you send a pull request. The place where this gets the most awkward at the moment is that when you touch code, if for instance you have to refactor code that already didn't have tests, it puts you on the hook to basically add tests for that code that you touched, which is, you could make a pretty good argument that that's a good thing, but it does put it in a case where it's like, okay, this code is broken. I don't want to take on the burden of refactoring it for good testing at the moment, but I can't touch it unless I add tests. So the only ways around that are to change the code coverage threshold or the code coverage semantics, or to make these tests optional. One thing that I pointed out a couple of times is that it's not being able to override tests, or rather it's not being able to override checks that is the problem that I have. It's the fact that there are no artifacts when you override the checks. There's no way to tell whether it's appropriate to. You're not required to add any context when you do so. You just like, it just provides this user experience where we're like, kind of maybe in some circumstances we would like this check to pass, but like, unless you decide not. And if you decide not, just do it. I don't have a good solution to this. Like Ilya kind of makes a good point in his last thing there that, yeah, if we get code coverage up to 80% across the entire code base and everything is good and tested, like once we're in a good place, this ceases to be so much of a problem. I think we're a fair way from there. I still, my personal preference, if I was configuring code coverage, I would not have it aiming for an 80% number. I would go with those semantics we spoke about before, where it was like, you know, don't make the code coverage go down. But that's all I have.
Right, and is that an easily configurable setting in like Sonar to have that as an option of don't let it go down?
Not to my knowledge with Sonar.
Oh, okay. All right.
I
Cool.
believe Sonar can do total coverage and coverage on a diff as two different things. So you can say you must have 80% coverage for the project, or you must have 80% coverage on your diff. And you can also tell it to do coverage based on different semantics, like lines versus conditionals and things like that. The other thing that I just wanted to check in on, I had thought at one point that Sonar was actually just using Go's coverage semantics, so it was using package level coverage semantics, but the last time I checked, it doesn't seem to be that way. It seems to be somehow actually figuring out the lines that you touch. So,
and if that's the case, you'd think it would be better at figuring out, 80% coverage only on things that you actually new code, like code that you added or changed, as opposed to, you touched this package and therefore, it didn't have 80% coverage and now you're on the hook for it. That's odd.
Yeah, well, I think there was a case that drove this particular, me asking to turn it off was that to make the check optional, that is, was that I had refactored some code that, to the human eye was pretty obvious that I just moved code from one place to another.
Oh, I see. So it showed up in the diff itself.
Right,
oh, gotcha.
The new lines, you don't have tests for them, so.
Cool. Ilya, is there anything else you want to add to this before we move on to keep the discussion here quick?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's see. Daniel, you were on the call and you had you added this discussion here for a pull request.
Yep. So it was on the call last week, but I'm not sure. I wasn't on, so wasn't sure if it got to. So this comes out of, in Slack, there was some discussion with Jorge, who I mentioned in the PR, who I believe actually works on Azure. So it was cool to get his input and have him looking at the project in general. But he was concerned about when I created the resource groups, it had basically a, if else kind of checks on the names for the resource groups to make sure it adhered to the Azure naming conventions. But obviously if those ever change in the future, then that could become stale. So essentially what this is doing is just taking out that test and just handling failure on creation of resource groups when it makes the call with the Azure Go library. So it just seems a little bit more consistent. So, if they make any updates, then that will be reflected without us having to change actually any lines of code or anything like that, and actually reduce the amount of code. So it was good as well.
Yeah, I think that's, in general, it's definitely good to take advantage of the validation logic that's provided by the cloud providers, since that key is up to date and authoritative source, as opposed to having to duplicate or capture any of that logic in the Crossplane code that can easily diverge or go stale from the upstream cloud providers. So I think that's a good idea.
Cool.
Yeah, and Jorge is on the Azure team. I'm not sure exactly which part of Azure he's on, but he is part of Azure. So it's always good to have his opinions on things.
Absolutely.
Cool. It looks like Nick was able to follow up on that just recently. So that work looks like it's should be ready to go and get merged into master, Dane.
Cool. Sounds good.
Good stuff. All right. So I think that's all I had on the agenda document here. Was there anything else that anybody wanted to bring up in this discussion right now?
I know we had talked about the default resource groups a little bit. I didn't know if we wanted to spend any time on that here, if we'd just rather take that to different discussion that need to be longer.
Yes, at the default resource classes, we had, we had had a quick discussion about that last time, and the summary of that was that we need to figure out our weakly versus strongly typed resource model. So there's kind of some more overarching design that needs to be involved in that. So let's because we can get down into the weeds in that one pretty easily, probably.
For sure.
Let's schedule some time offline to have a discussion about that with you, Daniel, and continue to drive that there.
Awesome.
Is your schedule pretty open, or do you have any known constraints that wouldn't work for you?
Not any particular, I guess. I'm going to be out of town on this Thursday, but besides that, I'll be at AWS Summit if anyone's going to be there. So.
Okay, where is AWS Summit?
This one's in Chicago on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. That sounds fun, man. Did you have any big plans for what you want to accomplish there, or are you just going to go and see what's there and learn?
Yeah, pretty much just go and see. There's the company I work for has some meetings up there as well. So we have a big office in Chicago.
Cool. If you could do me a favor, could you start a little Slack question on Slack to see who wants to be involved in talking about default resource classes, and we'll find a time to do that.
Definitely.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dan.
For sure.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So that is the end of. Here we go. That's the end of the agenda here. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to bring up? All right, sounds good. So I will be giving a talk on Crossplane on Thursday night here at a local San Diego meetup that I'm definitely excited about doing. So I think that'll be good to continue meeting with new people and getting feedback about Crossplane and spreading that message. So that's something I'm looking forward to this week. And otherwise, we will see you on Slack and GitHub, and we will meet again in 2 weeks. All right, thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.